Hello humans, Master DinnerFlax here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve. And today I'm going over probably one of the worst conceived decks of all time, and it's Counter Fairy. Now why do I say that? Because, so the whole point of Counter Fairies is pretty simple. Activate counter traps, get bonus effects for activating them, which is really cool, in theory. The issue with counter traps is, unlike actual regular traps, there is nothing proactive about a counter trap. They are always reactive outside of one, and that's this one. This is the only proactive counter trap in the game. That matters, I should say. There are, I think there might be like two more, but they're really bad. But either way, so drastic drop-off is the only proactive counter trap, which is an issue. So why is this an issue? Well, here's the thing about a deck that is entirely dependent on being reactive. If your opponent summons a big beater and just attacks, you lose. It's just as simple as that. As long as they activate as little cards as possible, Counter Fairies can't win. So the only people you can beat with this deck are just complete idiots that don't want to play around counter traps. And it's just that simple. Like, as soon as they start doing that, you start losing. And you could play 100,000 card demise, and it doesn't matter, because that's just the common issue that always happens. So what I decided to do is I would take it a little different. I would try to be more proactive. And some of the card choices will reflect that. So let's just get into it. 3 Artemis. It's the best counter fairy. So the original... most counter fairies are continuous effects, which is important because it means you can't ash them and you can't negate their activation because they don't have an activation window. They just happen. You can only negate their effects on field. Kind of like Banisher of the Radiance, if that makes sense. You can't negate the effect that it's banishing anything with Strike, but you can do it with Breakthrough Skill. It's the same with the Counter Fairies. But, however, this one is different. 2 Power Angel. Now, this one is a really weird choice because people either play one of it or none at all. And I think that's not a good choice. Because the whole issue I just addressed with Counter Fairies is that you have nothing proactive to do. But after negating a card, getting another level 4 body that you could just keep, like Artemis or Meltiel, or you can go into a rank 4 to kind of push over something, or just get an extra effect, like, that's really good. This card is probably the most powerful, like, one in here, not based on its effect itself, but the fact that it gives you access to a toolbox of things you need is super important. And not to mention, you want to see Artemis as soon as possible, and this is a way to help you see it. So another thing I'm not playing is what's its name? Guiding Ariadne, because one thing I noticed when playing it didn't actually do anything. Like, you never got its floating effect because your opponent's not gonna destroy it for you. So it just stayed in scale and made counter traps free. The issue is counter traps were already free in this deck because Artemis nullifies any cost, Meltiel nullifies any cost, Minerva nullifies any cost. So what was the point of playing it? Like, because Ultimate Providence, while it was cool, it was only good with Ariadne, but Ariadne wasn't good. So there was no way that both of those cards were being in here. Even with Sanctum of Parshath, Rebirth of Parshath, it wasn't good. It literally just didn't do anything. Like I said, like, it's so win more to bad players, and that's why I just didn't play it. But let's get into the next one. Meltiel, 2 of it, because it's probably just the most disruptive one. If you actually want to break apart a board and you want to, like, actually do stuff to your opponent, this is one of the ways to do it, because you can draw all your negates, but as long as your opponent's not an idiot, you're gonna lose. But this is kind of the exception. This is why I like Power Angel, because it can search this, is if they, quote, do nothing and go for the attack, activate negate attack, gain 1,000 life points, pop their monster, and it was like a Sakuretsu armor that you gain life for, but if you like had another counter fairy, you also like got a draw or recycle and a boost. It's like stuff like that. It's just really, really good because it actually deals with threats. It doesn't just assume your opponent's just going to throw all their cards at you. So yeah, this is probably one of the best ones. Minerva I thought was really good, but it's okay. It's okay at 1 because you definitely don't want to draw multiples of this. Even though it's like the most proactive, it's kind of the most niche because you really want to use this when you start cycling the drastic drop-offs, because afterwards your opponent just is out of the game as long as you're just cycling those. But it only works in hands where you have a lot of counter trap cards and you also have a follow-up, which, like when I say follow-up, like the next summon. So it'd have to be like 3 counter traps, 2 monsters for this to be really good. And that just didn't happen very often. So I decided to just play one of it. Because, again, with the Power Angel, you can always search this. And with Ties of the Brethren, too. So it's just like, yeah, you only need to see it once. And then Zeradias, just to search Sanctuary in the Sky. I'm maxing out on Divine Punishment just because I took out a lot of counter trap cards because they were shit. Same with Ariadne. So yeah, just wanted that. And I need Divine Punishment to be live. And then this guy is literally the best monster in the deck. Holy shit. Because this allows you to get to the drastic drop-off cycle really, really soon. So if you don't know, in a simplified game state where you're just doing battle damage, every time you attack, you just search drop-off. And then you do it again, search drop-off. It's literally like a Yada lock. And, like, almost entirely, because they're losing their draw phase. They can't respond because of the counter trap. So they're just losing their draw phase, and you're just killing them. And that's super, super powerful. But even in those scenarios where that's not happening, well, just search one of your negates. Like, it's really, really simple. And the fact that it actually revives itself with its own effect is also really good. It just takes a lot of setup for this deck. So for the spells, 3 Duality, 2 Desires, 1 Upstart. I could have went 3 Desires, but I think it was overkill because you don't want to open multiples of pots because that's like, because they're hard once per turns, it's kind of rough, especially if you draw 3 pots, because the pots are going to get you to more pots and more draws. And it's like, you only want to, your hand ultimately should be like 2 to 3 counter traps, 1 to 2 monsters, and Sanctum of Parshath, which is the next card. And that's all you want. You don't really want anything else. 3 Sanctum of Parshath. It's actually really bad outside of the boost, because when it says set cards cannot be destroyed, that also includes you. You can't destroy your opponent's set cards, which is really bad, because there was like 101 times where I was like, man, Melty, I'll pop your back row. And it's just like, nope. And it's like, oh, fuck. It's actually not that good. And the stack effect I never use because that's awful. You never... If it was just like recycle and shuffle them into the deck, for not even a draw, that would be better than stacking them. Because when you stack them, you're not stacking proactive cards. You're stacking reactive cards, which is bad because if your opponent does something else that you weren't planning, well then you forced yourself to get a dead draw. So that's awful. I'm not doing that. And 3 Ties of the Brethren. No Card of Demise, because if you guys know my theory about Card of Demise, unless you are playing Draco or Yosenju's, which is kind of funny, unless you are playing those 2 decks, you are playing Card of Demise to make your deck better, but in order to play it, you have to make your deck worse. Because you're taking out all the proactive cards for traps, just to resolve Demise well, and it makes your deck less consistent and less powerful for the cost of playing a card that makes your deck more consistent and more powerful, which is counterintuitive. It's like cutting your deck down to 40 by taking out the consistency cards. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You should be cutting out the filler, and Card of Demise forces you to play filler. So, I didn't play that. I played 3 Ties of the Brethren instead, and I haven't regretted it. I don't like Card of Demise very much. I think, while a +2 is powerful, it's only as powerful as the cards you get, and if you have to make your deck worse in order to resolve it, then it's not that good. And Sanctuary in the Sky, just because you need another name. And then 3 Drastic Drop-Off. I already explained this. 3 Rebirth of Parshath. Actually the best counter trap in here, but I think it's better than anything else because it's a negate and a monster that searches cards, so that's really good. Solemn Strike, just the most universal. This one, it's the Infernity Barrier of this deck. Very good. Negate Attack, which is kind of funny. But it was like I was saying, if your opponent just does nothing, you lose. But if you have this, you can kind of crawl yourself back in the game. And we got 1 Solemn Warning and 1 Solemn Judgment. The side deck doesn't matter outside of this card because it's a counter trap, so you can actually like use it proactively. And then the extra deck also doesn't matter, except this card and this card. This card's actually really insane. I actually really like it in here. But like this card, you need it for the extra name with Rebirth. There was a time where I like had Parshath in the graveyard, and I summoned this just to banish it for the Parshath in the main deck. So that's come up before. So yep, that's pretty much it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'm not going to say I'm very experienced with this deck, and I'm also not getting replays because this deck is actually really boring to watch, and it's not that fun to watch. It's not even that really enjoyable to play, really, because it's just like you either win really hard or you will lose really hard. There's no in between, and this deck actually just loses a lot of time. When it loses, it just loses because it doesn't have anything to do, and I am trying to like come up with a solution to that because that's awful. Like the fact that your deck has no proactive things, and instead of trying to address it, you just accept them as a flaws. That's a mistake. You should always be trying to improve either the deck you're playing, yourself as a player, or anything along those lines. You should be looking for improvement instead of complacement. And that doesn't just apply to Yu-Gi-Oh! That applies to everything. And I know that's going kind of deep for a shit deck like this, but it's kind of true. I'm kind of stubborn when it comes to bad decks. I'll try my hardest to make them as playable as possible. And since I did Lair of Darkness so much, and I think I've got one of the most playable versions out there now, I just want to try Counter Fairy now. And I'm going to say, if you want to try to make this as best as possible, I would suggest this card and this card to be in your main deck at all times, because these two are probably the most powerful counter fairies. And Artemis, like, it's a no-brainer, but I still say it's probably not the most powerful. It's between these two. The fact that this makes a rank 4 and this pops a card and kind of like keeps you in the game for so long, like, these two should probably find a way into a counter fairy main deck. And Artemis should find its way out, because God, that card's awful. It's like this, Sanctum of Parshath, because it doesn't actually do anything. It actually does less than this. And I don't want to play a card that's just extra win more. It's the problem with continuous spells in general. They don't do much of anything, even when they're doing stuff. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. And remember, Master DinnerFlax will take your soul.